A man from Australia attempting to qualify for the 1964 Summer Olympics held in Tokyo flies to England only to become stranded with no money or no way of getting home. He then takes the most unconventional way possible, taking him on a grueling 3-day claustrophobia-inducing journey. And welcome to Dredge Reality, where we talk about crazy facts, mysteries, and scary stories we've dredged from reality. Please subscribe to our channel, hit the bell notification and the like button so you don't miss any content we've dredged up for you. Now let's get to digging.
These stories are based on true events, some accounts proven. Others are people's claimed accounts. Some details may be disturbing to some. Viewer discretion is advised.
Reginald James Spiers, known as Reg, was born on December 14, 1941 in Adelaide, South Australia, which is the capital of South Australia and its most populous city. It's the 5th most populous city in all of Australia, with a population of 1.5 million people. But in 1941, it had a population of around 330,000 people. Growing up in Adelaide, Reg had a pretty normal life. As he was growing up, it was very noticeable that he was growing up to be large and very physically strong. By his teenage years, he had already grown to over 6.5 foot tall with a very powerful build. This led him to take up javelin throwing in his teenage years. He played throughout school and rose in the ranks of Australian javelin throwers. In the 1961 Australian Track and Field Championships, he achieved 3rd place. He continued to improve, and the next year in 1962, he secured a 2nd place win. These early successes qualified Reg for the 1962 Commonwealth Games held in Perth, Western Australia. He was 21 years old and full of drive and passion. He competed against international athletes and finished 5th with a best throw of 69.7 meters. Fueled by his Commonwealth Games experience, Reg set his sights on representing Australia in the 1964 Summer Olympics. He continued training and competing during the 1963 Australian Summer. However, his performances during this period did not meet the Olympic qualification standards. Shortly after, Reg got married to a lady named Catherine and had a daughter with her named Joanne. While happy with his new family, he still couldn't stop thinking about getting a shot in the Olympics. Reg, undeterred, was going to figure out a way to make this happen. He wasn't going to let all of his hard work go unnoticed, so he traveled to England in early 1964. He had the idea to travel to England and compete in their games, thinking it would give him another chance for qualifying for the Olympics. However, his performance there was not good enough either. Feeling defeated, Reg just wanted to get back home to Australia at this point. His daughter was about to have her 1st birthday, and not only did he want to get home to see his family, he desperately did not want to miss his daughter's 1st birthday. There was only one problem though. He was completely broke and couldn't afford a plane ticket home. Reg saw the airport was hiring and decided he would try to get a job and use the money to earn a plane ticket home. He got the job and started working at the Heathrow Airport in London. He worked in the export cargo section of the airport. He started saving every penny. This was until his plan was crushed by a thief that stole his wallet containing all of the money that he saved. He was upset, but he had to push forward with the plan. He desperately wanted to get home to his family and in a hurry. Working in the export cargo section of the airport, he had a bright or not so bright idea, according to how you look at it. He would ship himself cargo back to Australia. As crazy as this idea sounded, Reg remembered seeing animals come through the cargo export all the time. He thought to himself if they could do it, he could do it as well. Also, working in this area, he knew about how to do cash on delivery. That means he could ship himself to Australia and the cargo would not be paid until it arrived. Although it would cost more to ship a huge freight box than to get a plane ticket, it didn't matter, because at that point, he would already be back in Australia, so he would figure it out when the time came. Reg knew this was a crazy and dangerous idea, but he didn't care. Knowing the ins and outs of the cargo export area of the airport, he knew he could make this happen. He knew the maximum size of crate that could be sent by air freight. Having all this knowledge that he had about the process, he got to work. Reg had been staying with a friend while he was in London named John McSorley, and he asked him if he could build him a cargo box to help him ship himself home. At first, John was hesitant, but he knew Reg, and he knew how he was. He knew he was going to do it with or without his help. So John thought to himself, if Reg is going to do this regardless, I might as well make him a safe enough box to get there. Reg told John that the box needed to be exactly 5 foot by 3 foot by 2.5 foot. John got to work and built Reg the perfect box for his specifications. The crate was designed to allow Reg to lie on his back with his knees bent, or to sit up straight-legged. He also added straps inside the box so Reg could be held into place during loading and unloading. Each end of the crate was held together with wooden hinges that could be operated from the inside. This made it to where Reg could let himself out of either end of the box. John also added a label on the box that said it was a load of paint and was addressed to a fictitious Australian shoe company. This was to avoid suspicion that a person was inside. Reg and John packed some supplies in there as well. They packed in some canned food, a torch, a blanket, a pillow, and 2 water bottles, one for water and the other for urine. After all, it would be a long flight, and he would need some supplies to survive the journey. On October 17, 1964, Reg crawled inside his custom cargo box, and John delivered him to the airport for shipment, and Reg waited to be loaded onto a plane. He was eventually loaded onto an Air India plane headed for Perth, Australia. Reg ultimately wanted to get to Adelaide, but he settled for Perth because it was a much smaller airport at the time, and it would be easier for him to pull off his stunt. He just wanted to get back to Australia any way he could. After being loaded onto the plane in London, he experienced a 24-hour delay in the flight because of heavy fog in the area. The first stop would be in Paris for a layover. Once he was in the air, after a miserable 24-hour delay, Reg had to pee really bad. He also needed to stretch his legs. He had just been stuffed in a small box for over 24 hours. Reg slowly makes his way out of one end of the box and stood up. So relieved to stretch his legs after 24 hours, he grabbed a can and urinated in it. Just as he is finishing up relieving himself, he notices the plane starts descending because of the short flight from London to Paris. In a panic, he sets the can full of urine on top of the box and seals himself back inside. Once Reg reached the French baggage handlers, he could hear them saying terrible things about the English. They had found his can of urine and thought it was left there as an insulting joke by their counterparts in London. Luckily, this meant they weren't suspicious towards the box, so Reg was in the clear. He stayed in the box continuing his journey, being loaded onto another plane headed towards Bombay, now modern-day Mumbai. When Reg arrived to Bombay, baggage handlers moved him upside down onto the tarmac on an extremely hot day directly in the sun's glare. He is strapped in, but his feet straight in the air. He was stuck like this for over 4 hours with the sun just pounding down on him, sweating profusely and stuck in a very uncomfortable situation. He eventually takes his clothes off. Sitting there for all of these hours in the direct sunlight almost made Reg give up. He was miserable, but he just kept telling himself to wait and be patient. It would end soon. He was just so hot and miserable, it was almost unbearable. Luckily, they didn't find him without his clothes. They eventually came and loaded him onto another plane, and he was relieved, but he still had a huge journey ahead. A flight from Bombay to Perth, which is over 4,500 miles. After a long and treacherous journey, Reg finally landed in Perth, Australia. He knew he was in his country because he could hear the Australian baggage handlers swearing in their accent about the size of the crate he was in. Reg was smiling from ear to ear. He had finally made it to Australian soil, and he was so relieved. But he wasn't going to let them know he was there yet. He had almost pulled off this entire thing. Reg knew they would take the crate to a shed, so he was patient and waited until they moved him in there. When they left him in the shed, he got out straight away and no one saw him. There were cartons of beer in the shed. Reg usually didn't drink, but in this time of relief and celebration, he decided to crack one open and have a few sips. He was so relieved he had made it. After a grueling 63-hour journey enduring cramped conditions, extreme temperatures, and a near miss with being discovered during a brief exit in Paris, the cargo plane had finally landed in Perth. He traveled over 9,000 miles in these conditions. He had to hitchhike his way from Perth to Adelaide, which was a considerable distance at over 1,600 miles. He finally arrived home and was reunited with his wife and his daughter, just in time for his daughter's birthday, which was his primary motivation for the crazy scheme. Understandably, his wife initially found his story difficult to believe. However, considering his sudden appearance without any conventional travel arrangements, she eventually accepted his incredible tale. Back in London, Reg's friend John McSorley, who had helped him build the crate and sent him off, grew increasingly worried when he didn't hear from Reg after some time. Out of concern for Reg's well-being, John contacted James Coote, a sports correspondent for the Telegraph newspaper in London, and shared the unbelievable story. Once the news broke, the media in both the UK and Australia went into a frenzy. Newspapers, radio, and eventually television were filled with the incredible story. The story of the Australian javelin thrower who mailed himself back home in a box. It was an instant sensation. It was a quirky, daring, and almost unbelievable tale that captured the public's imagination. People were astounded by Reg's audacity and the sheer improbability of his success. He became a temporary national hero in Australia for his resourceful and unconventional journey. The airline, initially unaware of their unusual cargo, was pressured by the intense media attention. In the end, they decided not to pursue Reg for the unpaid freight charges, likely due to the negative publicity it would have generated. Reg became a media sensation, his incredible journey home a captivating story that spread far and wide. While he achieved his goal of making it back for his daughter's birthday, the attention surrounding his feat was intense and unexpected. The intense media attention even reached Reg's mother, who was reportedly quite overwhelmed by the constant presence of reporters and cameras outside of her home. The media attention eventually died down, and Reg took a brief retirement from sports. He returned to his athletics in javelin and won a national javelin championship in the 1967 season, winning with a throw of 73.77 meters. He continued to compete all the way up until the late 70s. Following his retirement from athletics in 1979, Reg became involved in drug smuggling. He was arrested by Australian Federal Police and charged in the Adelaide courts in 1980. He was charged with conspiracy to import $1.2 million of cocaine and cannabis resin into Australia. He pleaded guilty to the charges. Turns out working at the airport and shipping himself wasn't the only cargo he was involved in. In October of 1981, after Reg pled guilty to the drug charges in Australia, he decided to go on the run with his then-girlfriend, turning him from a convicted individual awaiting sentencing to a fugitive on the run. The Australian authorities had no idea where he had gone. He was free at last, for now. A few months later, on January 5th, 1982, Reg resurfaced in New Delhi, India. He was arrested under suspicion of being a drug courier, so he obviously kept up the same old ways, even after escaping Australian justice. But this arrest wouldn't set him back much because he managed to escape Indian custody soon after. At this point, Reg was a wanted man in Australia and India. Both countries went years looking for him, but to no avail. On December 1st, 1984, at the Bandaranaike International Airport in Sri Lanka, a man with a French passport by the name of Patrick Claude Albert Ladeau was called on by Sri Lankan Customs for a secondary inspection. For some reason, Customs was triggered into thinking they needed to look into Patrick further. They took him to an area of the airport where they searched his bags and person more thoroughly. During the search, Customs officials made a significant discovery. Hidden within a cassette recorder that Patrick was carrying, they found 41 packets of various drugs. This included a substantial quantity of 1 kilogram of heroin along with hashish. The concealment method was elaborate, designed to evade detection. Upon the discovery of drugs, Patrick was immediately arrested by Sri Lankan authorities. The charges were severe, given the quantity and the type of drugs involved, and Sri Lanka's strict drug laws. Once they got Patrick into custody, they figured out he was really none other than Reg Spiers, using a fake French passport to avoid detection and still smuggle drugs. From 1984 to 1987, Reg was held in a Sri Lankan jail while going through the trial process. After years of trials, on June 2, 1987, after a thorough legal process, Reg was found guilty on 4 counts of possessing heroin and 1 count of possessing hashish. This was a really big deal because in Sri Lanka at the time, drug trafficking carried an ultimate penalty. He was sentenced to death. Yeah, that's right, you could get the death penalty for drug smuggling. This was a major life-altering judgment, placing him on death row. Faced with the death penalty, Reg with legal counsel initiated an appeal against the sentencing and conviction. His appeal was successful, and his death sentence was overturned. This saved his life, but he still faced imprisonment. With the death sentence overturned, Australian authorities moved to have Reg extradited back to Australia to face the outstanding charges from his 1980 guilty plea. Sri Lanka allowed Australia to extradite him back. Upon his return to Australia, Reg was finally incarcerated to serve a 10-year prison sentence for the 1980 drug conspiracy charges. He spent 5 years in prison in Adelaide before he was released early in the early 1990s. He faded from the public eye until 2011 when his daughter Reg Spiers was herself convicted of drug manufacturing and trafficking offenses. This indicates that the shadow of drug-related crime continued to affect the Spiers family. Since then, the man who shipped himself in a cargo box has managed to keep his life sealed in a crate from the public eye. So would you have shipped yourself home in a wooden cargo box like that? I think I would have just worked in the airport a little bit longer, but I guess he did need to get back to his family. Comment below and let me know what you would have done. If you want to send me a story or just talk, comment below or send me a message at contact@drudgereality.com. I check all of my messages. If I use a story you share with me, I'll give you a shout out in the video and tell people to go check out your channel. Thanks so much for watching, and please make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any reality we've dredged up for you. I'll see you next time with some more crazy facts, mysteries, and scary stories dredged from reality.